Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to all you crazy mentalists that tune into the Kev Baker Show. Yes, that's right, it's that time of day again. It's time to get your abnormal, paranormal in or on the go. Yes, we're back, we're live. Want to thank all of you for being here today for the final Kev Baker Show of the week. Of course, I'll be back tomorrow with Scotty, Joe, and who knows who else might join us on the Woo Crew for Freaky Friday. Now then, looking ahead towards next week on June the 1st, and who can believe we're moving into June already? I'm going to be joined by two returning guests, somebody that made a big impression on me the first time they were on the show, and I've got Bill Bean to thank for introducing me to Steve and Jen Hodgson. So they're going to be on the show on Monday, and we're going to be getting into the deep paranormal woo. And I've got lots of woo lined up for today. Trust me, folks, you are not going to regret taking 2 hours out of your valuable time to come and check me out here. And what I've lined up for you includes, well, how would you put this? We're going to get into... Now, hang on, if I just turn that off in the background, my fire stopped in the background, so turn that off, like, distracting me there. Yes, today I have got a plethora of woo for us to get into. We're going to talk about something called the Battle of the Solar Eclipse. I know, it's new to me. We're also going to talk about mystery disappearances. Then we're going to get into an amazing space palace that they're going to be building in the sky. Some more space woo. And then some UFOs before I open up the phones for all of you. So yes, you can get your say on today's Kev Baker Show right here on tfrlive.com. I want to thank everyone over in the chat room on tfrlive.com. We've got the TFR Live YouTube stream as well. We're on KBS 2 today. There's so many different places we're going out, but all of you are equally welcome here. And I want to give a special shout out to my friends up there, or over there, in the Emerald Triangle. Yes, Grover, I'm talking to you and the rest of your crew over in the Emerald Triangle. We have got listeners here, there, and everywhere. And that's thanks to the reach of Truth Frequency Radio. And remember, share it far, share it wide. Let's use social media to spread the word about our #1 network. So then, let us get to our first story today. And today, being the 28th of May, I thought we'll look back in history. We'll have a look and see what went on this day in the ancient past. And I found a cracker for us. Let me show you what I've got. So we have May the 28th, 585 BC. The Battle of the Solar Eclipse. Ever heard of that? I hadn't. So it said, on this day, 28th of May in 585 BC, a fierce battle was underway in Asia Minor when the light vanished in the middle of the day, causing the warring armies to lay down their arms and declare a truce. Now, the famous solar eclipse was allegedly predicted by the Greek mathematician Thales of Miletus. Probably butchered that, as we know. And it provides a debatable calculation point for some major dates in ancient history. But how on earth did he accomplish this incredible astronomical observation and subsequent prediction? So it takes you back, and this is from Ancient Origins, to the violence of ancient astronomy. And it says, Greek historian Herodotus wrote that Thales predicted a solar eclipse in a year when the Medians and the Lydians were at war. And by reverse engineering the methodology used when calculating future eclipses, modern astronomers have been able to calculate precisely when this historical eclipse occurred. So according to an entry on Moonblink, a total eclipse of the sun occurred on the 28th of 585 BC, Universal Time, Old Style. So we're going back not only to ancient times, but Old style times as well, hey? With the maximum eclipse occurring at 14:22 Universal Time. Now that's 2:22. What a synchronicity that is, eh? And the event is described as a dramatic total eclipse that plunged the sun into darkness for 6 minutes and 4 seconds at maximum, creating an amazing spectacle for observers in a very broad path. 271 kilometres wide at maximum. Now, this spectacular event would have been seen by ancient cultures in Central America, France, and northern Mediterranean countries, while a partial eclipse would have been visible across the Americas, Europe, North Africa, and Northwest Asia. So it comes down, it gets into the mechanics of a monumentally difficult prediction. Now, the reason this astronomical event is thought of as being so important is that predicting a solar eclipse compared with a lunar eclipse is exceptionally difficult. The astronomer must not only calculate when it will occur, but where on Earth's surface it will be visible. And according to NASA, in a lunar eclipse, the moon passes through the Earth's shadow, or sun shadow, sorry, and the phenomena is visible on the whole side of the Earth. That is in nighttime, and then often last longer than an hour. So in solar eclipses, however, the shadow's moon falls across the Earth in a comparatively narrow path, with a maximum duration at any given location of about 7.5 minutes. Now, so to accurately calculate a solar eclipse, the observer requires an intimate understanding of the moon's orbit around Earth to within fractions of a degree of accuracy. And what makes Thales' prediction a historical mystery is that historians know early Greeks at large didn't have this essential lunar data, and there are no other records of Greek astronomers in this period accurately predicting any other eclipses. So where did that knowledge come from? I ask you, the audience. Ponder on that one. So it goes on to say, thus, it is thought by historians that the only place Thales' advanced astronomical knowledge could have come from was Egypt. And then we start getting into the birth of geometry and things like that. But I want to come back to the battle here. The astronomical conclusion of the battle of the solar eclipse. So it says, returning to the war described in the opening paragraph, after 15 years of fighting, on the 28th of May, 585 BC, the armies of King Aeetes of Lydia were in battle with the forces of King Cyaxares of Medes, near the river Halys in what is today central Turkey. Now, chroniclers noted the, quote, heavens darkening, and soldiers on both sides laying down their weapons in awe of the spectacle, and that the event ended both the battle of the war, and the kings of Cilicia and Babylon intervened, and a peace treaty was negotiated, and the river Halys, where the battle of the eclipse was fought, became the border between the Lydians and the Medes. Now, whilst most astronomers would agree that May 28th, 585 BC is the most likely candidate for the Thales predicted, or for when he predicted the eclipse, a Wired article says the famous astronomical event has been debated by hundreds of scholars for nearly 2 millennia, and that some authorities believe that the Thales eclipse may have occurred even earlier in 610 BC. But the reason most agree with the 585 BC date is the record of the famous battle in Asia Minor, ending when, quote, the day was suddenly turned to night. And yeah, it just goes to show you when you look back and see what happened on any given day, it can lead to some really, really interesting stuff. And when you start talking about the moon and eclipses and solar stuff, you know who really springs to my mind right away? It's our good friend that we had on last night, Kevin Nacy. He's a man that goes by many names, but we all know him and he's so close and dear to us all. And he often talks about the moon, acting strangely, all the Planet X, Wormwood, Nibiru type stuff. And I must admit, when I was reading that today, it was Kevin that was at the forefront of my mind. And I know you'll all be pleased to know that since we're all thoroughly enjoying Kev coming onto the show, we're going to be bringing him on a lot more. And he's definitely going to be coming back in the next couple of weeks. And we're going to be getting into a whole heap of woo. Because Kev is very much like me, into a lot of the same topics. And I'm really looking forward to going down the rabbit hole with Kevin and all of you in the near future. So keep your eyes open for more on shows with Kevin. Now then, moving on quickly. We're halfway through the first segment already. Time flies when you're having fun with you people out there, or you crazy mentalists, as I'm now going to start calling you. Because you have to be a crazy mentalist to sit and listen to me for anything more than 5 minutes. And I doff my caps to you all. Yes, not caps, plural. I'm not wearing two invisible hats, but you get me. All right, so big up to all of yous. And over the time that we've been delving into the strange stories, the weird kind of topics that are out there, I think the majority of us really kind of get a head scratching moment, that kind of what on earth is going on moment, when we talk about mysterious disappearances, missing 411 type cases. Now, when I think missing 411, I tend to think over in the national forests and parks in America because of the work of David Paulides. And big shout out to him and all the people that work on the whole kind of strange disappearances, the missing 411 kind of subject. But today I'm going to take you back closer to home for me here, because it's just over the sea in Ireland, and we're going to take a look at one of these mysterious disappearances, only this time not so much in a public forest or anything like that, but just, walking home one night after a party and bloop, you just disappear. And that's going to be a good warm-up for us looking at some of the more famous or maybe even infamous disappearances throughout time. So if we come to my favourite website, The Mysterious Universe, we have the mysterious disappearance of Trevor Deeley. Now, a big shout out to anyone listening to this over in Ireland that may know Mr. Deeley. I do this with the utmost respect, but it's definitely one of these mysterious ones, or maybe quite explainable. But at the same time, with so many people disappearing day to day, week after week, month after month, young, old, you name it, it's one of these kind of really strange topics. It truly is. And this story got a bit of strangeness. So it says for 22-year-old Trevor Deeley, things were looking pretty good in 2000. The Irishman had been working in an IT department in the Bank of Ireland Asset Management in Dublin, where he was considered a a model employee and had a lot of friends. Now, he was considered a cheerful and reliable guy. And he had a new American girlfriend that he had met in Dublin, who he had just been over to see in Alaska. So by all accounts, there was nothing to even hint at the weird events that were about to unfold for him. And no one would have probably ever guessed that he would end up as one of Ireland's most mysterious and baffling unsolved mysteries. And this was a new story to me today. When I read it, I wasn't aware of this story. Maybe some of you are, but if you're not, it says on Thursday, December 7th, 2000, Deeley attended an office Christmas party at the Hilton Hotel on Charlemont Place, and after that, he and some buddies decided to keep the party going by going to an establishment called Buck Whaley's nightclub on Lower Leeson Street. Now, this is all in Dublin. Now, there They chatted over drinks until Deeley left at approximately 3:30 a.m. I bet it was 3:33, I'm just saying, and headed to his office, where he allegedly made some emails and tended to some business for the following day while talking to a colleague named Carl Pender. Now, at this point, there was anything particularly bizarre about any of this other than the early morning hour. And when Deeley left the office at 4 a.m., he entered a steady downpour with an umbrella in his hand to go back to his flat in the Renoir complex on Serpentine Avenue in Ballsbridge. There was nothing out of place just yet. He was described by Pender as being a bit tipsy, and there was a taxi strike going on at the time, so he was forced to walk. But his home was not far, and it wasn't really a big deal at the time. He even left a voicemail for a friend on the way to let them know that he was heading home, and he would call them the following day. However, Deeley would never make it home, and in fact, he has never been seen or heard from since. So the following day, Mr. Deeley didn't show up for work. It was considered a little odd, as he was never late, but considering how late he had been out the previous night, many co-workers just assumed he had slept in. He never did show up, and when he still did not show up for work the following Monday, people began to worry. Deeley's flatmates were contacted, but they had been away for the weekend and had no idea what Trevor had been up to. But it was obvious to them that he was not there. The local authorities, the Gardaí, were notified, and they found that there had been no further use of Deeley's cell phone after that call to his friend. They then went through CCTV footage from the evening in question, and that is when some rather eerie clues would emerge. Now, footage from before Deeley went into his office on that evening showed that there had been a man dressed in black loitering about the front gates for about half an hour before the missing man arrived. Now, in the footage, Deeley shows up and he has a short chat with the unidentified man before heading inside and locking the gates behind him. So, apart from the strange hour of day, he sees somebody on the street outside his office. He has a brief conversation and goes in. Nothing too weird just yet. It does not seem to be an altercation of any kind, and after this, the mystery man leaves. Now, when Deeley exited his office at around 4 a.m., this man is nowhere to be seen. It is not known who this man was, or whether he had arranged to meet Deeley, or what they talked about. And just about the only thing police know for sure is that he was not an employee of the bank. Now, this might at first seem to have no clear connection to the disappearance, but it would become very relevant and possibly more sinister when other CCTV footage was looked at. Says another piece of the footage was retrieved from a camera on Haddington Road, near the bank, which shows Trevor walking along in the rain with his umbrella at 4:14 a.m. Now, because of the early hour, the fact that the weather was so bad, and the absence of taxis, there is no one else on the street at the same time. However, 34 seconds after Deeley passes the camera, a man in dark clothing also passes by, appearing very much as if he's following him. Now, making it even spookier is that the Gardaí highly suspect that this is the same man who was seen in the earlier footage waiting at the bank gates. Now, who this person and what the connection does it have to Deeley, if any? No one knew then, and no one knows now. After this, Deeley is not picked up on any other CCTV footage, and there are no more sightings of him, as if he just stepped off the face of the earth. Now, that in itself, in a modern city, even in the year 2000, we're not going back too long, but I know that there was a CCTV, most big cities in the UK. Again, not to the extent or the high definition value that we have today. But for somebody just to disappear and no kind of clues to turn up on surrounding cameras, that in itself struck me as being pretty strange. Now, it goes on to say here, in the meantime, flyers and posters were being put out everywhere looking for information on Deeley's whereabouts. Rewards posted, and there was urging by the Gardaí for the man in the footage, or anyone who knew him, to step forward. But none of this led anywhere, and authorities scoured the entire area, even dredging the bottom of the canal that goes through, but no trace of Deeley was ever found. Now, anyone who had had a recent contact with Deeley was also thoroughly questioned, including the friends at the party, Pender, and even the girl he had gone to visit the previous month in Alaska, but there was nothing suspicious at all, and no new leads. In fact, not a trace of Trevor Deeley has ever been found. And when the investigation was reopened in 2016, there was a promising lead with a witness who claimed that Deeley had been involved in an argument with drug dealers, but this never led anywhere of any real significance. This has all been very baffling, not only for police, but also for Trevor's family and his sister, and Michael Deeley has said of it, "I want closure. I want to know where he is, and I want to know what happened after that last clip of CCTV footage. And I want to stop all the nightmarish thoughts that you can have. And I want to stop the not knowing." Nothing has been found. There's been zero information or findings. I don't believe that people vanish. That makes no sense to me. That's the most agonizing thing. It actually starts to hurt your brain when you think about it. What in the world happened to Trevor Deeley? Did he run off? Was he the victim of foul play? Now, if so, who would want to make him disappear and why? Who was the mysterious man in the CCTV footage, and what part does he play in all of this, if any? What words did he and Trevor exchange during the brief meeting at the bank gates? And these are the kinds of questions that orbit around this case and have not been dispelled. Sorry, there are the kids. No, that's the kinds of questions, yeah. It's a typo in the article, folks. Trevor Deeley seems to have just evaporated into thin air. And to this day, there is no good lead, no suspect, and no answers to any of the many questions that has been left in his wake. One of thousands of people that go missing all the time. Now, some of them may very well have a very logical story behind what's happened. Some of them probably tragic, I admit that. But from time to time, I do think you can just bloop, disappear. You know, we've looked at the Bermuda Triangle. We've looked at various locations around the world where we contest that there may be a thinning of the veil between our world and the next. And even if the case of Trevor Deeley turns out to be something more of this world, who knows what he was up to, it doesn't take away the fact that from time to time you do get people that just do disappear. You know, you think of that aircraft, MH370, hundreds of people just disappear. Now, I know logical thinking would say there's some physical reason behind that, and the location of that aircraft we just have not found yet. But then there's another part of me that wonders. It just wonders if at times we can, or we do have the ability, sometimes uncontrollable, to flip from this world into another. And then you have to ask, if that's the case, then have there ever been instances where people just appear in our world without any reason or backstory or who or where they came from? Well, we'll get into more of this after the break right here on today's Kev Baker Show. And we're coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio Network. We're simulcasting on KBS2 and TFR Live. Join me for more woo after the break. Don't go anywhere. Yes, indeed, you crazy mentalists out there. Now I'm going to get a quick drink. I'm going to fix my fire. My fire's playing up. What's that all about? And I'll be back in a couple of minutes. And don't forget, folks, we will be turning on the phones later on today in the show. And a big shout out to Donnie. Donnie, brother, you're gonna love the video I done earlier on today. It'll be live by the time we get off the show. And yes, trust me, brother. Ancient Australian, mystical, magical cave art. Oh my, we had it all going on today, Donnie. You would have loved it, and you will love it. And I can't wait to hook up with Donnie again, and Luna, and Jess, some weekend real soon. If you haven't checked out the whole Australian woo story, well, it's a story, it's a show that we done from down under. I didn't literally go down under, but I kind of did, through a digital wormhole. And you can find that on the channel here. The ancient mysteries and wonders and UFOs and all the good stuff that came out with Donnie, Luna and Jess. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, ladies, gentlemen, mentalists. I'm Kev Baker. You're tuned in to today's Kev Baker Show. I've been talking about mysterious disappearances, and yes, I do believe that we can just blink out of existence and end up somewhere else. I remember the story that Scott Lopez gave us one day. It might have been a Freaky Friday, but it was around the time of the story of the hairy hands, you know? and the hairy hands of Devon, I think it was. And he was telling us about a story about a gentleman who was on top of a hill. All of a sudden, it became very misty, and then he ended up somewhere else in almost another reality. The landscape changed. Everything about him kind of wasn't what was there previously. So yes, I do think it can happen, and if that can happen, I ask the question: well, can it go the other way? Can people on one of these other many timelines that are out there, can that happen where they appear here? No trace of them leading up to the point in history where they just show up here. Just so happens I might have one of those cases for you coming up in a moment. But if you like thinking about all this kind of parallel timelines and different versions of you and realities that are all stacked, overlapping one another, although we're very unaware of them, at times we become more aware. And I watched a really good film the other night for the umpteenth time. It's called Coherence, and it's about just that type of thing. It's about a comet, funnily enough. We started off today's show with an astronomical event, the Eclipse. And this is a comet going over, and this comet is said to cause crazy things to happen to people when it comes round and passes the planet every 100 years or so. It's a fictional storyline, but what unfolds is something absolutely tremendous. If you like all the quantum woo and other versions of you, check out Coherence. You'll enjoy that one, ladies and gents. And yes, like I say, it just so happens I might have one of these stories for you, and it comes from the audience. Yes, during the break I was checking out the chat room, and I had seen somebody talking about the dude who had turned up in the Tokyo airport. The man from Taured. Yeah. Well, I went and had a quick look for it, and I'm going to get into it with you right here, right now. And this is one example of somebody who may have just bloop, turned up here. Now, I'm not saying this guy's from another timeline. It sounds like he might be from another world. But let's just take a look, because when it comes to people just appearing here, should we really get upset whether it's another timeline or another planet? No! All equally cool. Let's take a look. And again, funnily enough, we're going back to ancient origins. And it says here, the mysterious tale of a man from Taured. Taured. Evidence for parallel universes or an embellishment? So it says the man from Taured, sometimes referred to as the Taured Mystery, or the man without a country. How cool is that? I'm just a man without a country. There's definitely a country western song in there, something, right? Leave it with me. I will pen as a song, folks. It's a story about a man who arrives at a Japanese airport from a country called Taured. In fact, I can hear, like, I don't know, yeah, what you call him? What's his name? Willie Nelson. I can see him singing about this. I was just a man that arrived in a Japanese airport. Anyway, many people have claimed this story to be true. So the crux of the problem pertains to Taured. Now, one would notice that there is no country of the name Taured, either today or during the purported period for when the incident took place, i.e., the 1950s. Now, the story ends with the man disappearing forever, a day after arriving in Japan. Moreover, all of his personal documents, such as his passport and driver's license, also conveniently disappeared, thus making this strange story unsolvable. And I say to unsolvable just the way we like them. It goes on to say here the man's arrival. Now, the story of the man from Taured begins quite specifically in many sources with a hot day in July 1954. On that particular day, a man was said to have arrived at Haneda Airport, also known as Tokyo International Airport. I'm taking note of all these factoids from a song, by the way. And this man has been described as a Caucasian looking with a beard. Now, whilst his primary language, it is said to be French, it has been purported that he spoke, a Japanese broken French maybe, and other languages as well. Now, so far, there is nothing extraordinary to note. So it says the sequence of event then differs according to which version of the story one encounters. In one version, this man hands over his passport to be stamped, and the Japanese immigration officer notices something strange. Oh, this is brilliant. While the passport looked authentic, the country where it was issued, Taured, was recognised as non-existent, either by the officer or one of her, I like it nice and woke, his or her colleagues. Yeah, keep it open. His, her, or they. I know it's the 50s, but pronouns matter. Indicating that the man should be taken away for interrogation. Now, in another version, the man mentioned that he was from Taured, and when the immigration officer did not believe him, he showed him, her, his passport. A very woke individual writing this one. So the location of Taured, where is this? Now the next part of the story details the man trying to convince the immigration officers that Taured does indeed exist. Now according to the traveller, Taured was located between France and Spain and had been in existence for 1,000 years. Whoa. So when shown a map, the man pointed to the area occupied by the Principality of Andorra and was puzzled as to why his country was called Andorra on the map. Now both sides refused to give in, and the Japanese officers insisted that Taured did not exist, and the traveller argued otherwise. Do you think he might just have been a bit of a character? Do you think he was like from Andorra? And he's just a bit of a character, man. I don't know. Maybe he just called Andorra Taured. I don't know. So it says eventually the man was held by the officers as they were suspicious that he might be some kind of criminal. And they brought him to a nearby hotel for the night. Where is it? They brought him to a hotel, or to a nearby hotel for the night, whilst they conducted their investigation. So to ensure that the man did not escape during the night, 2 guards were placed outside his room. The next morning, when the officers went to the man's room, they realised that he had simply vanished, and there was no signs of an escape. Cut that, cut it. Yes, indeed. A definite Kev X-File moment. Additionally, all of his personal documents, which may serve as evidence for the story's validity, had apparently disappeared as well. So, let me just stop there and think about this then, right? Let's think about what we've got, okay? Let's stop, let's take stock, okay? You've got a guy, a bearded individual, turning up in a Japanese airport. That much we definitely can agree on. And then it differs between whether it was established in his passport or whether he had just mentioned the fact he came from somewhere that didn't exist. Taured. He says Taured is 1,000 years old. Quite adamant about all of it. And when he took them to the map, it wasn't as if he didn't recognise the map of the world. So I'm thinking he comes from another timeline, because he was able to still point to the same place on our planet, which would still be his planet. Not much difference, remember, just a few things here or there. And he was utterly convinced that where he was pointing to, it was called Taured. Now this sounds to me like it could be, and I'm not daft, keeping the mind open, could be an elaborate hoax. But for the purposes of KBS and the abnormal paranormal, we're going to go with it. So I think so far, pretty interesting. And then he just bloop, disappears. What was the purpose of this traveler's mission, I wonder? So it says here, travel through time or space, or just an exaggeration. One of the most notable explanations for this incident is the man from Taured had somehow passed through a parallel dimension by accident and ended up at Haneda Airport. It has been suggested, based on this explanation, there is a parallel Earth which is similar to ours, with the exception that the locations called Andorra here is now known as Taured over there. And it could well be that all of the countries may have different names. May have roughly the same geography, same planet, but different players on the different realities where different names could easily come up. But he recognised it, so the landmarks were the same. So it says then, another suggestion is that the man was a time traveller from the future. Though this interpretation is arguably more problematic than the one supporting interdimensional travel. It has also been suggested that an incident like that did indeed happen, but perhaps much less sensational. This more mundane story could have been embellished each time it was told, so much so that it eventually evolved into the great mystery that it is known as today. And finally, it is also entirely possible that this story is merely an urban legend, and the story of the man from Taured might not have even occurred in the first place, and may just have been the creation of someone else's imagination. Well, let's just go into that, shall we? Because if the man from Taured, Taurus, whatever you want to do, we better agree on what we're going to call this, right? Because maybe we can make the man from Taured appear. Maybe we could put enough energy into a story, or a character, or a thought form, like the man from Taured, and maybe we'll read about this story happening 1 month, 6 months, 6 years down the line. A mysterious man turns up in that Japanese airport. Physical dude, pull his beard. He's there alright. I could even write a song about him. Did we create him? Oli Shinoli. Keep your eyes open for the follow-up. The Real Man from Taured 2.0, KBS style. Yes, indeed. So now we're going to go flip the tables, and we're going to go back in reverse again. People that have disappeared. More infamous ones. Bigger named ones, okay? Some good ones in here. Some we'll all have heard of. Some I haven't heard of. But we're going to take a look at it together. Why? Because that's how we roll on KBS. And I don't have one of these. I don't have two. I have got 9 of the most mysterious disappearances of people other than Amelia Earhart. So then, it says it turns out that a number of people throughout history have mysteriously disappeared. Some were famous when they went missing and became even more legendary afterwards. And some reached celebrity status simply because they disappeared. Here are 9 strange tales of people whose disappearances still haunt us today. So listen, folks, how about you play this little game at home? Try and think to yourself maybe 3 famous disappearances that might come up in this actual list here, okay? Try and think of them, right? It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. It's just a little game to play at home. Al Hakim. Never heard of this cat. So Al Hakim was a 10th and 11th century ruler of the Fatimid dynasty, who was known for his erratic and contradictory leadership. Sounds like you'd have got on well today, wouldn't he? He led for 25 years between 996 and 1021. 25 years of his 36 years life. Now, during which time, for instance, established a generous policy to support the poor, only to follow it with some astonishingly harsh or strange edict, such as forbidding women to leave their homes, and then forbidding cobblers to make or sell women's footwear. Dang, he took that toxicity to the next level. That cat's even way beyond me. So one night in February 1021, Al Hakim rode out of Cairo and he was never heard of again, nor was his body ever found. I put to you, ladies and gentlemen, that in the year 1021, the cancel culture were around. I'm only joking. Next up, we go to Edward V of England. It says the eldest son of Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville was born while his father was abroad in Holland. Now, when Edward IV returned to his royal position, he named his son the Prince of Wales. But upon the king's death, a dispute erupted between the child's maternal and paternal uncles concerning the legitimacy of the king's marriage to Elizabeth. So ultimately, Edward V and his brother Richard, the Duke of York, were locked away in the Tower of London. Now it is presumed that they were murdered and that their skeletons found in the tower in 1647 were those of the boys. Dang. You want to go looking for skeletons in people's closets, or in this case, towers, you look at the royal family. Dearie me. Number 7, the lost colony of Roanoke. Cool story. The disappearance of someone. Not cool if you're them. I didn't mean it like that. Come on. That wasn't that bad. The disappearance of some 100 settlers from their colony on the Roanoke Island, now in North Kakalaki, in the late 1580s, remains an unsolved and still compelling mystery embedded in American history. Now, the colony was established by Governor John White, who promptly returned to England to fetch supplies. And by the time he returned in 1590, the settlement and all of its people were just gone. And the only trace was the word Croatoan or Croatoan carved on a fence post and CRO on a tree. Croatoan was the name of the Native American tribe that lived on Roanoke, as well as the name of the present-day Hatteras Island. Several theories arose, and archaeological exploration continues, but nothing definitive has surfaced about the settlers' disappearance, and that there deserves a standalone show. The Lost Colony of Roanoke. Stay tuned, I'll definitely put something together on that one, folks. But moving on through this list, Solomon Northrop. I'd never heard of this cat either. And it says here, Solomon Northrop, or his story, is a story of tremendous misfortune and resilience. Though he was born a free person in New York about 1808, Northrop was kidnapped and sold into slavery in 1841. Now, he was owned by a series of sadistic masters until he was able to find a way to send letters to his family in 1851. Now, his freedom was legally reinstated in 1853, and Northrop went on to co-write a memoir, 12 Years a Slave, that sold like hotcakes. Now, he became a national celebrity and lectured throughout the country. His kidnappers were eventually indicted, but the charges were dismissed in 1857. Northrop then promptly retreated from the public eye, and it is likely that he joined the Underground Railroad, but the date and the circumstances of his passing are unknown. And like I say, I mean, no offence to anyone out there, but that's a story I'd never heard of. Number 5, Ambrose Bierce. It says here, Ambrose Bierce, never heard of this cat either, a newspaper and short story writer, was well known for his satirical column, The Prattler, which ran in a number of West Coast papers such as the San Francisco Examiner. Now, he served in and survived the American Civil War, his experiences in which he detailed in his best-known stories, and eventually married and had 3 children. Now, while he continued as a newspaper columnist, he also wrote many novels and short stories, as well as The Devil's Dictionary, ooga booga, and a book of social commentary disguised as a collection of dark and witty definitions for well known terms. So he left the US for Mexico in 1913 during the Mexican Revolution. After December of that year, there remains no record of him, though numerous theories have been put forth over the past century. Very interesting. Moving on. George Mallory. So then, George Mallory was a schoolmaster in England and a seasoned mountain climber. Now, he had trained on the most difficult routes up the Alps before being recruited for the first major climbing expedition up Mount Everest in 1921. Now, that first attempt was thwarted by high winds, and a second attempt in 1922, which also failed, involved an avalanche and the death of several porters. And finally, in 1924, he set out on a third expedition. Mallory and another climber, Andrew Irvine, went off to attempt the summit on June the 8th and were never seen again. Now, they left the world to wonder what had taken place on that fateful day, including whether before disappearing they had become the first climbers ever to reach the summit. Irvine's axe was found in 1933 at about 27,750 feet, which seemed to indicate that they did not make it to the top and likely fell to their death. Now, 75 years later, in 1999, an expedition discovered Mallory's body at 26,760 feet, and as of 2015, Irvine's remains had not yet been found, and the exact circumstances of their passing are as of yet undetermined. Although I'd say hypothermia probably plays a big role in it all. Wallace D. Fard. Now, Wallace D. Fard was the founder of the Nation of Islam, rose from being a silk peddler on the streets of Detroit to become a preacher and self-identified saviour of the African American people. He had a short but influential stint as an outspoken NOI leader in Detroit from 1930 to 1934, with a number of run-ins with the law during that time. Very little documented biographical information about him exists, though several stories about his origins circulate. Now, he claimed to have been born in Mecca, though the FBI's findings suggest that he was born in New Zealand and led the life of a minor scofflaw once he arrived in the United States. Now, he disappeared in 1934, often referred to as the Prophet and thought to be the incarnation of Allah by his followers of the Nation of Islam. He is celebrated on Saviour's Day on February the 26th. So the last one before we get to the break, and then after the break I'll tell you the number one. It was Raoul Wallenberg. So it says here Wallenberg was a well-connected and upstanding Swedish family. He was from a Swedish family. Now, he'd been a star student of architecture and became a successful businessman. Because of his family and business connections throughout Europe, he was recruited as a special envoy for a major rescue operation of Hungarian Jews in 1944. Now, between March and June of that year, the bad guys from World War II deported about 400,000 Jews. Wow. Most of them to Auschwitz death camp. Now, Wallenberg distributed documents of the Jews of Budapest and convinced Hungarian authorities to let documentation function as passports. Now, those passports saved some 15,000 people from certain death. In January of 1945, Wallenberg was arrested for unknown reasons by Soviet troops, who later claimed he died of a heart attack in 1947. But no one knows for sure if he died then or what happened to him after his arrest. And after the break, we will get into the number one missing person. Yes, indeed. And then we'll get into some space woo, some UFO woo, and then I'll be hearing from all of you because I'll open up the phones. I want to get your take on what you've been hearing tonight. Maybe some of your ghost stories, some of your woo stories. Join me after the break. I will be right back. Yes, indeed. And a big thank you to all 96 of you out there right now. Hope you're enjoying the show. I'm going to take a little drink, a little refreshment, and I'll be back before we go back to the network, okay? So stand by, folks. I will be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hour number 2 on today's Kev Baker show. We're talking about the Battle of the Solar Eclipse in the first part. Then we got into mysterious disappearances and mysterious appearances. Now, I've still got the number one coming up. It's coming to you in just a moment. And then we're going to take a look at one from Down Under. There's a strong connection between the Kev Baker Show and our Australian listeners. And we've had a few of them on the show now. And we've got an interesting one I'd never heard of coming from Australia. And it's thanks to our good friend Donnie. Yes, so from my mob to your mob, Donnie. Much love, brother. And we'll be taking a look at that after we get the number one missing person. Now, the article that I was on, it had Jimmy Hoffa as the number one strange disappearance, but I want to offer you what is my personal favourite. Now, everyone's going to probably, I would imagine everyone will have heard of this story. It might not be your personal favourite, kind of strange, weird disappearance, but for me, the story of D.B. Cooper, it's got it all. It really, really does. And I'm going to the FBI.gov website here to their historical files on cases, and it says that the D.B. Cooper hijacking. So if we come down here, this is potentially, anyway, for me, it's one of the most interesting stories I've ever heard. It goes on to say, on the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, a nondescript man calling himself Dan Cooper approached the counter of Northwest Orient Airlines in Portland, Oregon. Of course, that's home of Ground Zero and Clyde Lewis. A big shout out to him and Ron and the rest of the team. Now, he used cash to buy a one-way ticket on flight number 305 bound for Seattle, Washington, and thus began one of the great unsolved mysteries in FBI history. So Cooper was a quiet man who appeared to be in his mid-40s, wearing a business suit with a black tie and a white shirt. He ordered a drink, bourbon and soda, while the flight was taking off, and a short time after 3 p.m, he handed a stewardess a note indicating that he had a bomb in his briefcase, and he wanted her to sit with him. On you go, DB. The sunned stewardess did as she was told. Opening a cheap attaché case, Cooper showed her a glimpse of a mass of wires and red-coloured sticks and demanded that she write down what he told her. Soon she was walking a note to the captain of the plane that demanded 4 parachutes and $200,000 in $20 bills. Now, when the flight landed in Seattle, the hijacker exchanged the flight's 36 passengers for the money and parachutes. Cooper kept several crew members and the plane took off again, ordered to set a course for Mexico City. This is where it gets interesting, because somewhere between Seattle and Reno, a little after 8 p.m, the hijacker did the incredible. He jumped out of the back of the plane with a parachute and the ransom money. Now, the pilots landed safely, but Cooper had disappeared into the night, and his ultimate fate remains a mystery to this day. So it says the FBI learned of the crime in flight and immediately opened an extensive investigation that lasted many years. Calling it NORJAC, the Northwest hijacking, we interviewed hundreds of people, tracked leads across the nation, and scoured the aircraft for evidence. Now, by the 5-year anniversary of the hijacking, we'd considered more than 800 suspects and eliminated all but 2 dozen from consideration. Now, one person from our list, Richard Floyd McCoy, is still a favourite suspect among many. We tracked down and arrested McCoy for a similar plane hijacking and escape by parachute less than 5 months after Cooper's flight. But McCoy was later ruled out because he didn't match the nearly identical physical description of Cooper provided by two flight attendants and for other reasons. So perhaps Cooper didn't survive his jump from the plane. After all, the parachute he used couldn't be steered. His clothing and footwear were unsuitable for a rough landing, and he had jumped into a wooded area at night, a dangerous proposition for a seasoned pro, which evidence suggests Cooper was not. Now, this theory was given an added boost in 1980 when a young man found a rotten package full of $20 bills that matched the ransom money serial numbers. Now, that was $5,800 out of 200,000. Out of 200,000, folks. That's what they got. So, where did DB come from? It was apparently a myth created by the press. We did question a man with the initials DB, but he wasn't the hijacker. And the daring hijack and disappearance remain an intriguing mystery for law enforcement and amateur sleuths alike. So yeah, the mystery of DB Cooper. There's various theories out there. Clyde Lewis, I've heard him talking about this a lot because it's from his neck of the woods up there, Portland, and I don't know. You might have your theories on who it was, how they done it, did they get away, what happened. But for me, that definitely has to be my number one. Strange disappearing people. So we're going to go down under now. And we're going to take a look at the disappearance of the Australian Prime Minister, Harold Holt. Never heard of this one, folks. And it says here, and a big shout out to Donny for this one. Harold Holt, the Australian Prime Minister who disappeared. You know there's shenanigans when somebody of that level disappears, right? So it says here, it's been 50 years since Harold Holt went missing while swimming off a Melbourne beach. His disappearance shocked the nation, and conspiracy theorists persist half a century on. So Harold Holt drove his maroon Pontiac to Cheviot Bay Beach, just outside Melbourne, on the 17th of December 1967. It was a Sunday morning, and Australia's 17th Prime Minister was unwinding after his first full year in office. So the 17th Prime Minister went missing on the 17th. Interesting. Just saying. After watching British round-the-world sailor Alec Rose arriving at Port Phillip Bay with a group of his friends, Mr. Holt suggested they head for a swim before lunch. So the 59-year-old Liberal leader had a holiday home in Portsea. He loved spearfishing and was a keen swimmer and diver. He said he knew Cheviot Beach, one of his favourite spots, like the back of his hand, but the conditions that day were especially rough. Now, those he was with described the tide as very high and the surf as very turbulent. One acquaintance, Martin Simpson, said the strong undercurrent was enough to stop him going in past his knees. Now, regardless, the Prime Minister changed into his swimmers and waded into the water. Now, he was seen swimming out to sea before suddenly disappearing. There's a bit of Jaws action going on here. Major Gillespie, Mr. Holt's neighbour and girlfriend of Mr. Simpson, I called her Major. It's Marjorie Gillespie. My bad. Hey, you never know, maybe Marjorie's a Major now. Who knows? But it says here, Mr. Holt's neighbour and girlfriend of Mr. Simpson witnessed what happened. She described it as like being a leaf being taken out. It was so quick and so final. Now, a massive rescue operation began with dive teams sent out and spotters with binoculars scanning the water from the shore. And by evening, nearly 200 people were searching for the Prime Minister. 5 days later, the search was scaled down and his body was never found. Now, he's remembered as the bloke who drowned. Australian National University political historian Professor Nicholas Brown said earlier this month. Then we get into some of the theories. So the police report didn't arrive at a conclusion about the cause of Mr. Holt's death, but said there was nothing to suggest it was anything but an accident. But the accidental drowning of a sitting Prime Minister, especially without a body, wasn't good enough for some. The disappearance of a Prime Minister in a rough sea corresponds to a Australian preoccupation with the beach as an ambivalent place, at once a proving ground and a threat. Professor Brown told SBS News. His disappearance triggered a range of speculation about connections to political intrigue, personal scandal, and international intervention, much of which has gone on for 50 years. Well, I say, folks, you don't get that much smoke blowing in the wind if there isn't at least a little bit of fire, right? So some suggested that Mr. Holt, a former lawyer, was a Chinese spy who swam out to a waiting submarine and was whisked away to Beijing. Holy moly! British author Anthony Gray published a book in 1983 supporting the theory, earning it a lifelong place in Australian political folklore. Now, but Mr. Holt's wife Zara, whose 3 children were adopted, dismissed the idea, reportedly saying her husband didn't even like Chinese cooking. That sounds a bit of a weird kind of way to dismiss the rumours. Others suggested that he could have been taken out. It was at a time when the vulnerability of politicians, who had also become more public figures, was highlighted, Professor Brown said. JFK had been assassinated in 1963, and Australian Labour leader Arthur Calwell had been shot at and slightly wounded in 1966 in the election campaign. Police also found what looked like a bullet hole in a window of Mr. Holt's office following his disappearance. Another rumour claimed that Mr. Holt took his own life, despite numerous accounts from those who knew him suggesting he'd been in a normal, positive mood that day. He was planning for the future, discussing the political agenda he would pursue in 1968. And the police report also found he stuck to a regular domestic schedule in the lead up to his fateful swim. So in a 1985 interview, his wife Zara, who was in Canberra at the time of his disappearance, revealed the last words he said to her. Before God, you're a rose of a woman. She also said she knew her husband had extramarital affairs with several women. He's an Australian, he's a man's man, right? I'm just messing. Absurd rumours. Historian Tom Frame, who wrote a biography of Mr. Holt in 2005, told SBS News the conspiracy theories surrounding his disappearance are more than fanciful speculation. These stories have been dramatic, more dramatic than the actual circumstances of his death. So Professor Frame, who's the director of UNSW, take it that's University New South Wales, Public Leadership Research Group, Howard Library, said people are often disappointed that the most obvious explanation is that he drowned at sea. As his biographer, I'm constantly asked by people what I think happened to him. They wonder if there is a backstory or any substance to the theories that he was assassinated or was spirited away to China in a submarine. The truth is not especially exciting, and Mr. Holt's family agrees. It was a moment that barely registered in an intense final week for the Australian Parliament earlier this month. But on December the 6th, as politicians argued over the details of a bill to legalise same-sex marriage, the son of the Prime Minister who disappeared half a century ago quietly sat on the sidelines of the Parliament his father once led. It is my great privilege to welcome to the floor of the chamber Mr. Sam Holt. And that was the Speaker of the House said. And for a moment, the usual commotion of question time stopped. Now, Sam Holt, now 78, told The Australian last week the rumours surrounding his father's death or disappearance were absurd. He prefers the simple explanation. Harold is not a person who feared for his personal safety. He never was, and he would swim in places and times when others wouldn't. For too long, Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull said in Parliament, Harold Holt's uncertain and tragic end has been the defining feature of his life. And in his brief, or fairly brief time in office, Mr. Holt set in motion some landmark policies that shaped the next 50 years of Australian politics. I wonder if that's what made him a target. It says within 3 weeks of his 22-month tenure, Mr. Holt began dismantling the white Australian policy, ushering in a new approach to Australian migration that no longer overtly discriminated on the basis of race. And the most significant shift was a provision to reunite well-qualified Asian migrants separated from their immediate families for 15 years, said Professor Frame. And the Holt government also welcomed certain, quote, well-qualified non-Europeans to Europe. Now, what strikes me about this guy is, and about this story in general, you know, there's undoubtedly going to be a whole heap of conspiracies and ideas around a story where you have such a high-profile figure and then a story that's kind of left open-ended, just disappears, you know. Now, I've been looking at something recently called apophenia, and apophenia is a more general term for what we sometimes refer to as pareidolia, where we find patterns in random pictures. You think of clouds, you think of the wall in a cave even, you can start to see faces and things emerging. But in a more general term, you step back from that, and the human brain, any kind of data, it needs to have a pattern. It loves to have something familiar. And when you get a story like that, that on the surface could be logically exactly what we're told, and I don't know enough about it, but you've got this high profile guy just disappears, and then is it just that, or is our brain, you know, is that not comfortable enough for the brain that random things like that can happen? You know, crap happens, right? We've all heard that phrase, but our brains don't like that. It likes to make sense of things. It likes to build stories. It likes to take the information out there, whether it's connected or not, and weave a thread through it. We're storytellers. We love to know the story behind the story, and even the story behind that, only is there stories behind the story. It's all brilliant stuff. It's great woo, and this has turned out to be one absolutely splendiferous show so far. I might have just made that word up, but that's okay. We're all different on the number one abnormal paranormal show on any network, and you can phone in and talk to me after the break. And if you want to phone in and talk to me, it's dead easy. I don't bite unless you ask nicely. The call-in number is, if you're in the US, I really need some jingles in the background for when I'm doing this, like a game show music or something. If you're in the US, call in on 213-233-3998. That's 213-233-3998. Yes, so I want to hear from you after the break. We've got about 6 minutes before we get there. And I mentioned this briefly yesterday, but was I disappointed yesterday? Man, I was like a child waiting for Christmas. Elon's rocket with the astronauts on board was going up to the ISS, and it was all looking good. It was looking great. I was messaging Nano Girl. I was messaging Nancy. And Discord was open. There was like all these things happening, and we're all sitting there watching this, waiting for this rocket to go up, only for the weather to scupper it at the last moment. But it gave me the kind of thirst for some space news and some space woo. And let's stick with Elon for a moment, shall we? before we get to the amazing sky palace that the Chinese are building. Maybe for the Australian dude that went missing, I don't know. Maybe in conjunction with them. But Elon Musk, yes, history will be made in the next couple of days when he does finally blast off two NASA astronauts in the Dragon capsule. They'll go to the ISS, they'll dock, they'll stay there for a month, and they'll come back. And it heralds a new dawn for the space industry, and I say it puts us right into a new chapter of the space race, and or the space age, sorry. And we know that Musk eventually wants to shoot on off out there to Mars, and Joe Joseph, he's the one that springs to mind here. He often brings up the fact that he thinks all that's poppycock. He thinks balderdash. There's no way humans can live on Mars because humans are tuned to live on Earth. We vibrate at Earth frequencies. We're used to Earth atmosphere, Earth gravity. Everything about us is set up for here. And Joe's always said, you know, you can't do it, Kev. It isn't going to happen. Well, I've got a story here from Live Science. And I tell you what, this makes me think of Dr. Craig Venter and that speech he done at NASA Ames. Dr. Craig Venter's one of the guys that cracked the genome. He's one of these creepy bioengineers slash futurists slash transhumanists. And he talked about maybe in the future we could genetically modify our astronauts. Yes, that's genetically modify our astronauts for space travel. Well, that's starting to get talked about now. And if we come over here, it says colonizing Mars, Elon, you listening? May require humanity to tweak its DNA. So it says if humanity is ever going to settle down on Mars, we may need to become a little less human. Crewed missions to Mars, which NASA wants to start flying by, or in the 2030s, will be tough on astronauts, exposing them to high radiation loads, bone-wasting microgravity, and other hazards for several years at a time. But these pioneers should still be able to make it back to Earth in relatively good nick, agency officials have said. It might be a different story for those who choose not to come home, however. And if we want to stay safe and healthy living permanently on Mars or any other world beyond our home planet, we may need to make some tweaks to our species blueprints. Yes, and that's coming from the experts, no less. It says genetic engineering and other advanced technologies may need to come into play if people want to live and work and thrive and establish their family and stay on Mars. And that's from Kenda Lynch, an astrobiologist and geomicrologist at the Lunar and Planetary Institute in Houston. And she said this on May the 12th during a webinar hosted by the New York Academy of Sciences called Alienating Mars, the Challenges of Space Colonization. And that's when these kinds of technologies might be critical or necessary, she said. It says genetic enhancements may not be restricted to the pages of sci-fi novels for much longer. For example, scientists have already inserted genes from tardigrades, tiny, adorable, and famously tough animals that can survive the vacuum of space. And they've done that into human cells in the laboratory. Yes, they're splicing us with tardigrades, folks. Couldn't make it up. The engineered cells exhibited a greater resistance to radiation than their normal counterparts. But you're no longer human at that point, right? You're kind of splicing, kind of metamorphizing into something that can survive in the vacuum of space. Who wants to sign up for that then, right? So it goes on to say NASA and other space agencies already take measures to protect their astronauts physically via spacecraft shielding and pharmacologically via their variety of medicines. So it's not a huge conceptual leap to consider protecting them genetically as well, provided these measures are proven to be safe, Mason said. Before we go to the break, take a quick look at this. China's plans for a heavenly space palace station, or space heavenly palace space station, spit it out, are dazzling. Yes, China has laid out an ultra ambitious timeline to construct its, quote, heavenly palace space station, a plan that involves launching 11 missions before 2023. I wonder if you'll be able to, like, splice yourself in the hotel to get into the hotel. It's a crazy world, folks. Join me after the break. The phone lines are open and Kevin is waiting. Don't go anywhere. There we go, folks. Now I'm going to get a quick drink because my mouth is sticking together like I don't know, I'm very, very thirsty thing. And yeah, we've got Kevin on the line when we come back after the break. And I want to thank you all for being here, as usual. Absolutely top notch, all of you. And yeah, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Final segment of today's Kev Baker Show. right here on Truth Frequency Radio. Yes, the phones are on. Kevin is on the line. I want to thank you all for tuning in to tfrlive.com. Remember to tell everyone about the network. Over 30 amazing hosts shows to choose from. We've got something for everyone, but probably not everything will be for you. We try to cover all bases, all genres of information catered for, and we roll differently on here because despite some of our differences, we always come back together at the end and we all shake hands, we all smile, we hug, and we move along. Because that's how we roll here on KBS. And now I'm going live all the way to yesterday's guest. It's Kevin in Minnesota. And what rhyming wonders will he have for his introduction today? Welcome back, Kev. Good to see you again, man.
Thank you for the opportunity to share my reality as I'm living in the wonderful state of confusion, also known Minnesota, in the United States. And I apologize for digressing to what is occurring. And I wanted to touch a little bit on it yesterday, but I forgot about it because it was so remarkable having the opportunity to talk with you, Kevin. But I'm not sure if you're aware about what's going on in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota with the riots.
Yeah, I've seen a bit of it, dude.
Now.
Yeah, I've seen a bit of it, man.
Well, it is just another continuation of the powers that should not be, where I believe that they're creating the distractions or the chaos, because as we all have witnessed in the past, they have agent provocateurs, and there's a lot of signs and video footage out there that's being pulled from Facebook and YouTube, where it was literally showing police officers smashing windows and the crowd's going along with it. And so I'm asking if everybody could take a moment or two and try to push out the energy of fear or negativity and try to push out the energy of balance and control. Because when we get caught up in our emotions, we tend to go in a wrong direction that we are originally trying to do. And I use the metaphor of how we're driving a car, and in the back seat of our car is all of our emotions. Now, would you rather relinquish the wheel and give it to your emotions, or would you rather have that emotion that you're feeling come into the passenger seat and recognize that it's there, but keeping control of your vehicle? Because when you do give somebody else control, who knows where you're heading? And as I stated yesterday, my biggest fear is that the powers that should not be are purposely pushing us to revolt. And it seemingly is happening. And it's ironic in itself that it's happening in the middle of America, where things like this occur, then it goes rampant from there. So I apologize for kind of throwing you off from what you're usually talking about. And I do love the D.B. Cooper story in itself.
So what'd you make of D.B. Cooper, man? What'd you make of that? What was your take on that one?
I think it's a very romantic and nostalgic in itself, and it kind of reminds me of the old Bonnie and Clyde, of where these individuals are sticking it to the big corporations or to the banks, and even though it is probably not the right thing to do, there's a little bit of a glee that you get when people are able to get away with, in a term used, sticking it to the ma'am. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Yes, indeed.
Excuse me, it's ma'am.
Get it right, Kev. Come on, man. Get it right. So listen, dude.
But yeah,
yeah, that stuff going on in Minnesota. I mean, I've been keeping an eye on it, And yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I'm sure there's people out there that are going to be reposting all of the information from that. But if I can, I want to take you to some of the other stuff I opened up with today. It was the DB Cooper stuff, but we also talked about this story I'd never heard of before, right? Where this individual had turned up in an airport. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, but anything from your people about people just appearing on our kind of reality on our plane, Kev? Just
Well,
on you go.
one of our most shared stories is about the five. Some call it the five grandfathers, and some will call it the seven grandfathers that all of a sudden appeared out of the water on the eastern shoreline. And they came out of the water, and each of these grandfathers had teachings to teach the Anishinaabe people. And ironically, when the fifth one went to teach the people what he learned, the individual that they tried teaching went instantly mad or insane. And what the individual was trying to teach us or trying to get us to remember is the ability of mental telepathy, of where we could read each other's mind.
Well, that's really interesting because when we done the Australian show the other day, we got talking about something called the bush telephone or the bush telegraph, and that's literally where people are calling each other up in their minds. But they're having telepathic conversations. Donnie, I know, is in the chat room tonight. Luna, they were saying how, despite the fact they're in different parts of Australia, Kev, they're able to have conversations back and forth in their minds. And that's exactly what your people are talking about there as well, then, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And even to take that further, and I'm working on this experiment right now with a few friends of mine where we're trading objects that we've had for prolonged periods of time, and especially with quartz crystals. Some of us are breaking our quartz crystals and sending the halves back and forth and using those in meditation and trying to utilize those crystals being whole, having the same frequency, and using them to tune into each other. It's almost kind of like remote viewing in a sense.
Yeah, it's almost some kind of quantum entanglement type woo remote viewing stuff going on. I do like that though, and again going back to the Australian thing, it ties in here because we were talking about a giant, it sounded like a stone ball or something, Kev, stone disc, and this is something that the elders have, and you got to be ready to handle the energy of this thing. And I remember Donnie saying that when he was in its presence, he just wanted to get away from it. It was like too powerful, made him feel sick. And I think that it was connected again quantumly because it was for communication between here and I believe I could be wrong, but the Pleiades sticks in my mind. So really strange, right?
Well, this is also with my people, we talk about ley lines or power lines in a sense that are underground or along Mother Earth. And if certain lodges are built on these ley lines, the story is that they could go so far as teleporting from one lodge to the other lodge.
Wow, bilocating?
Exactly. And I've been to what are called shaking tent ceremonies where an elder who's been taught in this ritual would commune with the ancestors and some of the head spirit animal guides.
Now you say shaking tent ceremony. Describe that a little bit more. I mean, what does that involve, Kev?
Well, the individual who runs it, he will be bounded up, would be wrapped in like a blanket, and then tied up inside the blanket, and then they would build like a teepee structure into the ground and around him. So there's no openings. It's in the ground. And then they have these big cedar boughs sticking out of the top of it. And it's usually made out of ironwood, is the branches that they use to make the teepee. And if you know ironwood, it's a very sturdy and strong of wood. And the shaking tent I went to, the individual was inside it and he started chanting. And as he started chanting, you could see the tent or the teepee starting to bend and kind of move a little bit, where by the time he was in full chorus of his chant, the top cedar boughs were like literally waving around like somebody had a hold of them and were shaking them violently.
That is wild, Kev. And just backtracking a little, you mentioned the ley lines, and Donnie, our Australian friend, he says the song line, they call it down there, Kevin.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's really interesting if you look at the indigenous people around the world, and you even into major religions, if you go down to its basic core root value, they're all pretty much saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's been unfortunate that man has utilized these different religious dogmas or ideas, and they found a way of using the mechanism for control. And this is where it gets into the sadness of the powers that should not be. Once they get that power, they want it and they don't want to let it go. And again, it comes back to recognizing the miraculousness of each of us and gaining that power back. And I don't like saying that in a sense, gaining our power back, more or less recognizing that power and utilizing it to manipulate the fields.
We got to remember who we are, Kev. That's what it's all about, man.
Yes, and each one of us are little droplets or particulates of those stars that we see in the darkness. And if we all can shine on, you crazy diamonds, imagine what the potentials of the possibilities would be.
So, Kev, I was about to talk about UFOs in a moment, but you're the only one on the line, so I'll keep a hold of you here while we can. UFOs, man, a lot of new UFO stuff in the news. We've spoke about them over the years, but Project Blue Beam, not Project Blue Book, but Project Blue Beam. Do you think that there's a chance they could pull off some kind of fake visitation, or do you think, again, we're just speculating, brother, but do you think we're getting close to the real deal turning up?
I would say yes to both.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Crichton had this excellent book called Prey, and in it he was talking about the algorithms that the scientists were using when they would mimic how birds would fly in flocks or how bees would swarm and how fish would swim in schools. Now imagine that same algorithm utilized for drones. So if you had specially painted drones to where they're 15,000 feet above you, you can't see them. And if they are all fitted with laser beams on them, then in certain patterns, they would be able to shoot all the laser beams, and where they would collide, there would be your 3D hologram. It's not that impractical in its principle. And with the technology today, absolutely, I believe we're able to use it. However, on that same vein, I would say that because of Space Force and because of the dealings that the powers should not have with extraterrestrials, I believe that there is a satellite net or some type of enclosure around the Earth that is only allowing those extraterrestrial races that we are in good standing with or working with to come to the planet. But I also think that there's rogue extraterrestrial entities that are trying to come here to assist us in our enlightenment. It's that constant battle between the Holy Trinity, positive, neutral, negative.
I'm just waiting for the big Nordic ones, the big blonde ones to get off the spaceship, Kev, and I will be absolutely jamming. But brother, I'm going to move on now. I have got Algorithm on the line, and Kev, we'll get a date. I think we actually sorted a date yesterday. Kev will be on in June, folks, and we're going to get into some real good, deep woo. Kev, thanks for phoning in, man, and yesterday was great, brother.
Yes, and thank you for the shout out. I appreciate you, brother, and lots of love to all of you. Recognize the miraculousness, people, please.
Well said, well said. So then, that was Kevin, Nacy, and yeah, Minnesota. Wow, it's all going on there. Seen a bit of that today on Alex Jones, watching a bit of that. Now we're going to, I think it's Algo. In fact, I know it's Algo. Is that you, Algo?
Yeah, you know it is, brother. How are you?
I'm really good, man. Really good. I've had a great week of shows here. It's been really good stuff. But how are you? How are you doing, man?
You know, I'm doing fine. All's well in the world. The reason I was listening to the Kev talk, and something occurred to me that with your woo searching and your sharing, I think you help us, at least me, to be able to discern the nonsense from the real stuff. And I would say there's a very famous book that talks about the end of days, and at that time, even the elect will be deceived. It says something like that.
Yep.
And I honestly just think from listening and participating and dialing into your woo vibe, you've really helped me to be able to discern some of the stuff I see that I know just can't possibly be really true.
Brother.
And then it helps me see the stuff that is true.
That makes my day, right? Because I'm very honest about my own journey. And when you start getting into all of this stuff, it's really easy to get caught up in and believe near enough everything you see. Over time, you do come to learn. You get stung a couple of times. You got to learn your lessons. It's like the school of hard knocks, especially here on YouTube. And you go right down almost to the bottom of the rabbit hole. But here's the trick. You never want to hit the bottom. You want to go right as close to the bottom of the rabbit hole as you can go, because then it's like a bungee rope. And as you come back up, you can still see the stories, the stuff that you've looked at that still holds true, that still has the kernel of truth and the basis for something that you can look into. There's data points there. And at the same time, you also gain an appreciation for knowing how to smell a tall story when one comes along. Now, not everyone develops that skill, not everyone develops that ability, and I still know a lot of people that were starting out on YouTube same time as me, listening to shows same time as me, and they did go to the bottom of the rabbit hole, and they're still there. And that's okay. That's okay, because I think we all need to go there at some point. But again, it's being able then to step back and say, there's a lot of real conspiracies in the world. There's a lot of real bad stuff. But that doesn't mean to say that everything we're ever told is always going to be wrong. And it's finding that balance, dude. But I'm glad I've been able to help you in some way, because I know there's no way I'm going to fix the world. And it's not that I'm defeatist. I'm just a realist. I've often said if you can just help people out there, then that's got to go a long way towards something, man. And I think we all keep each other right. That's the main thing. And there's going to be times when I veer off the reservation, and one of you is going to have to say to me, Kev, you want to check this out, look at that. And then it's about being big enough to say, there's new information. Okay, then, I got that wrong. You see, sometimes it's those 3 words that hold so many back. And those 3 words were, and they're hard, but you have to be able to say, I was wrong. And that's when you start to learn. And I'm just glad we're all in this together, Algo.
Hey, me too. And I'll tell you, I know you're not just for entertainment, my friend. I mean, you're a great radio broadcaster. You bring on good guests and fantastic topics. But I bet if we ask the chats, every chat that's listening to you, how if you've helped them to learn to see through deceptions and to be able to discern real reality from fictional reality, and we asked them to all press one, I bet you'd have a ton of ones in there. So I don't want to keep you. I know you're wrapping up your show. I always appreciate when I get to catch you, so thank you so much.
I always get left feeling quite humbled when you've been on the line, Algo. I really do. Thank you so much for everything you bring to the chat, to the show as well. You're one of many versions of the KBSers. We're all kind of similar. We're all a bunch of mentalists, and that's great.
Absolutely. Take care, brother.
You too, brother. You too. Absolutely phenomenal. Wow. So then, we've got a couple of minutes left, and yeah, I've got Freaky Friday tomorrow, but damn, never know what to say when somebody's nice to you like that. But listen, I don't know what we've got going on here, and again, like I say, you know, over time, when you look back, and it's always good to look back, you know, periodically, and look where you've been, look at the stories you've done, and trust me, I've had to look through the cracks in my fingers at some of the stories I've done earlier on. Again, like I said to Algo there, it's been able then to realise where you went wrong, how you can go wrong, and try as best you can not to go there again. And it's amazing once you've been bitten once or once you've been stung, how you start to recognise the hallmarks if they ever start appearing again. And I mentioned this earlier on in one of my streams today, but you know, there's a lot of big stories that have been doing the rounds for a couple of years now, more so on YouTube and social media and things, and they've gained a heck of a lot of supporters and followers. And in the next couple of months, things are going to get really, really kind of interesting. I don't know if that's the right word to use, because, you know, you've heard me talking in the past about the LARPs and all the games and all the half-truths and lies and grifting that goes on. And it's all starting to unravel. A lot of this stuff unraveled years ago, if you bother to take the time and go and look. It's not exciting. It's some of the stuff that the grifters are pushing, but the truth's out there. And it's all going to start coming to the surface real soon, because there's real world court cases and people suing each other and defamation here, slander there. And the point I bring it up is because we have to stick together. There's going to be a lot of people probably quite shocked when they find out some of their favourite go-to YouTubers or social media kind of personalities ain't who they thought they were. And I think it's important here at the network and on the Kev Baker show that, you know, we get ready for an influx of people who have all woken up in recent years, and they've woken up at probably one of the hardest times ever to wake up because of the amount of misinformation, disinformation, psyops, and everything else that's out there. But I hope that they know they can come here, they can come to TFR, and we'll do as best as we can to offer you protection from deception. Can't always promise that, because we're only human. And I can only speak for myself. And when I am wrong, you have to point it out to me, and I promise you I'll try everything I can to correct it. But between then and, well, now and whenever, well, we'll just enjoy the journey, and we'll keep doing what we do. We'll have a laugh, we'll have a joke, we'll look at the serious stuff, and I'll try my best to point you in the right direction when any of these things come along. But I'll never tell you what to think. That isn't my role here. It isn't. It's only to give you a window into how my mind works and the kind of things I'm looking at. And I just hope that they hold interest with all of you. And until next time, well, which will be tomorrow, I hope you keep it real. I hope you stay tuned to TFR. Not sure who's coming up after the break. That's absolutely terrible of me, but that's the kind of guy I am. I'm all over the place. And tomorrow on Freaky Friday, I promise we are going to go full woo ahead. You know, I've been such a great week of shows this week and the last week, and I'm really enjoying getting back into the woo and mixing it with the serious stuff as well. A time and a place for all of it, folks, right? So remember to tell everyone about the Kev Baker Show. And again, a big shout out to the boys in the Emerald Triangle. Oh man, if I could be in the Emerald Triangle with you guys right now, what a blast we would have. And Grover, big shout out to you, bro. He says he's going to be sending me a t-shirt from the Emerald Triangle. So as soon as I get that, you know I'll be cracking that on. And remember, we'll be back tomorrow. Freaky Friday, midnight UK, 7 p.m. on the East Coast, 4 p.m. on the West Coast, on this timeline, and many others. And I want you to be here too. So that'll be at tfrlive.com, TFR's YouTube channel, and it'll also be right here on KBS 2 as well. So until next time, keep it real. God bless wherever you are. Make it TFR. And Denny, just Denny, touch that dial. We're out of here, folks. Until next time, au revoir, as the French Kev Baker once said. And there ain't no French Kev Baker. So, folks, I want to thank you all for being here today. Oh, brilliant. And I'll go, dude, you kind of make me blush, man, but thank you. And Kevin, again, great call. Always great calls. You know, I wasn't expecting the whole Minnesota thing coming up on the calls today. That caught me a bit off guard, I must admit. But yeah, it's worth checking into, folks. And we'll, if there's anything bigger to cover on that over the weekend or whatever, we will get to it. I want to thank you all again for tuning in today. And yeah, I'll be back tomorrow. There'll be a pre-show, chill stream. And of course, it's Freaky Friday. We simulcast Freaky Friday. So until then, folks, keep it real. I'll be over in Discord in a little bit after I whoop my mum at Scrabble. Yes, it's I need to win tonight. I'm 2-1 down for the week. Can you believe it? She will never let me live it down. So before you leave, do me one favour. Hit the like button or hit the dislike button. Remember to hit share, because that means you care. And until next time, keep your mind open. Keep looking for the woo, but not to the point where your brain turns to black goo.
How dare you!
Excuse me, it's ma'am.